All right, so how many of you have avoided 3D printing because it seemed too confusing, too time consuming, or maybe it was just flat out too expensive? Well, if you answered yes to any one of those questions, the AnkerMake M5C may be a viable option for you, and it may be the best 3D printer for a beginner. Let's get started. What's good, everybody? Ken here, you're watching OriginaldoBo, and this is the AnkerMake M5C. And I reviewed the AnkerMake M5 just a few months ago, and AnkerMake came out with this, which is a much more compact version. If I had to guess what that C stands for, it stands for compact. So what we have here is a very stripped down basic version of the M5. It's a 220 by 220 by 250 millimeter build volume, which it's not the biggest build volume, but I don't think it's the smallest either. It's very similar to that of the Ender 3s. If you're familiar with those printers, they have a relatively small build volume as well, and this is very, very similar to that. The build design of this is really exquisite. It's probably one of the best looking printers. I personally think that Anker has some of the best looking 3D printers on the market today. It is an all alloy aluminum build. It is very, very rigid, very solid. And the best part is it is super easy to assemble. Not only does it look good, it's easy to assemble. Essentially, there is just 8 screws holding this gantry into place, and it takes just under 10 minutes to get this thing fully set up, ready to print, which is probably one of my favorite things about this printer. It also sports a direct drive extruder, which is fantastic if you want to print softer materials like TPU, which we did test some TPU prints. I did have to tweak the profile a little bit, but they did just fine. It can also print up to 300 degrees Celsius. So if you're somebody who wants to print materials that require a hotter temperature like ASA or ABS, you'll be happy to know that this printer does just fine with all of those materials. I didn't have any problems. The printer has a textured PEI build sheet already included. It seems like a lot of more manufacturers are going to this textured build plate. I really like it. Comes on and off, super easy. It's connected via magnets. And then it has like this little stopgap here on the back side of the build plate, so you know when the plate is firmly in place. You don't have to guess lining it up. I really like that. You'll notice that there is no touch screen, no LCD display on this printer. That is because they've opted to just use a single button, which is a play pause button. Essentially, you can control multiple aspects of this printer directly from this button, whether it be a double press, triple press, or a long press hold for 3 seconds. It will perform default actions in which you can also customize directly from the app. However, a lot of you will probably just want to go ahead and use the phone application while operating this printer. It's just much more convenient. And honestly, I find myself using the phone application on other printers as well, like my bamboo printers, because it's just easier to navigate than having to be directly near your printer. There is a USB-C port on the side, so if you want to put a USB-C dongle for additional storage, you can go ahead and do so. There is a QR code on the back that you'll scan to set up the application. And the whole thing literally, like I said, took about, less than 10 minutes to get this thing up and operational. And that was after I got it all assembled. And I guess I did have to do a firmware update. So maybe 15 minutes if I'm including the firmware update. And because this is a connected printer, you can do things like firmware directly over the cloud, which I like. I don't like having to just download firmware, put it on an SD card, stick it in the printer and let it run. It's just easier for manufacturers to keep their firmware and to keep the printers well maintained by pushing it directly from the cloud. Over-the-air updates are absolutely the best way to go when it comes to 3D printing, in my opinion. Some may differ, but I really think that that's super convenient. Overall, just the design of this, I really do feel like it's very refined, and it just prints amazingly. It does have a filament runout sensor. It does come with this filament holder. The filament goes through into the Bowden tube, comes down into here where there is a auto load and the gears for the extruder. One cool thing is you can auto load your filament and you can auto eject your filament. It has a retraction option, which is really nice. You just use the application. You'll notice there is an LED on the front of here. That LED will indicate whether the printer is ready to print or if it is heating. If it is in the heating mode, it will turn orange. If it's ready to print, you'll hear an audible beep that'll let you know that the printer is ready to perform its functions. There is auto bed leveling built in. You don't have to do any bed leveling. That I think is the most convenient thing in this printer is basically like literally you run the calibration. You don't have to use a paper. You don't have to do any manual calibration like you did with the old printers. Auto bed leveling truly is auto. I think it's like a 45-point bed level, which it's perfect. I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. One thing I will recommend doing is make sure you wipe your build plate down with some alcohol prior to printing. Otherwise, you may have some adhesion issues. I think most of the complaints on the M5 and the M5C stems from people not properly prepping their build plate. If you properly prep your build plate, you shouldn't have any problems. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Properly prep your build plate. Properly prep your build plate. Anyways, if you do that, you're not gonna have any issues. So let's talk about the prints, the print quality, because I think that's the most impressive thing about this printer. This printer does cost $399. There is a $40 off coupon floating around out there, so you can get it for essentially $360, which I think is a steal. So I ran two separate benchies here. I ran the one benchy, which I downloaded from the AnkerMake store, printed it directly from the phone. This benchy took roughly 16 minutes using their AnkerMake green filament. This is a PLA plus filament, and honestly, I think it looks pretty good. There's very minor imperfections. I don't see really any elephant's footing. Really nothing crazy to speak of. At 16 minutes, I think that this came out pretty exceptional. I wanted to run it again, but I wanted to print one of these dragons, so I ran another benchy using the color change silk PLA, and it came out pretty good. This one again took just under 16 minutes. I think it was like right at 16 minutes with me making some tweaks for this filament, and have some light angel hair sort of stringing. But overall, the quality is very, very similar to the 16-minute benchy that is pre-sliced from AnkerMake, but both of them came out pretty decent. I then went ahead and downloaded this articulated dragon from the AnkerMake store, and the coolest thing about this was I was able to print this without having to use any slicer. I didn't have to go to the computer to slice it. That's what I mean when I say an absolute idiot could slice things and print with this printer. You have the AnkerMake store where you can download files directly to the printer and just click print and go, which I think is incredibly convenient. But this color change dragon took about 3 hours to print. This was on the fast speed, and I think it looks pretty damn good. From there, I tried one of these little frogs where this frog didn't come out quite as well. I used a green PLA plus filament. This is a Sunlu green PLA plus, and it's okay. This eye didn't quite finish correctly, and the hand ended up breaking, but overall, I think that the print has enough detail in it. It does look pretty good, despite having some weird issues with the eye and the hand not fully completing. I'm not sure what's up with that, but it did print pretty quick. This print took about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Then I went ahead and tried something a little bit more complicated, which is one of these masks that you can download directly from the AnkerMake store. Now this mask took 9 hours to print, and I printed this with 0 supports. And honestly, the detail on this is super acceptable, even for how fast it was printing. Rigidity is good. We do have some issues in here from not having supports, but honestly, this is on the backside where you're never gonna see this anyways, and this could easily be sanded out and molded. If you were looking to sell something like this, you can easily, fix this, which you should be fixing. You shouldn't just sell a mask like that, but you could easily fix this. But this printed 9 hours and literally had no problems, and you can see it just fills up the entire build plate. It actually prints sort of like that. So fills up the entire build plate, 0 supports. I think it looks great. This is again that green PLA plus from AnkerMake, and I think it looks absolutely awesome. So, okay, so these are the designs that you can download from the AnkerMake store, and you can print these. Again, you don't even need to go into your slicer and make any adjustments or settings. But as you know, I have a 3D print store. And because I have a 3D print store, I like to test the models that I actually sell. And this is one of my most popular items. This is just a microphone. It's a pretty simple design. I print this out of Ceramic PLA Plus, and it's sort of interesting. On this printer, this took just a little bit over 1 hour and 45 minutes for this to print, and it sort of has a nice little sheen to it, which is weird because sometimes I print this same filament, PLA Plus, and I don't get this sheen. I get more of a flat-like look. Now on the BREW printers, I feel like there's a little bit more cooling happening because there's that side fan, so maybe I'm getting a different color or a different finish to it on those printers because it's not printing as hot. For this, I'm printing at about 230 degrees PLA plus, but I'm also moving almost as fast as this can go without sacrificing the quality. But overall, I think this looks absolutely awesome. No complaints whatsoever with the way this looks. I then went ahead and tested out a duck. Now the duck I print just like this on this. I mean, yes, I can fit 2 of them on there, but I just printed a singular duck. Now this was printed out of a glow TPU. Now glow TPU is a pretty abrasive TPU material. It's not the easiest to print. I do have some slight angel hair. I mean, very, very fine angel hair, like almost spider web like stringing. But honestly, even my bamboo printers do the same thing. I think overall, this looks fantastic. I don't have any problems with the quality. The infill looks good, and let's see if the support comes off decently. That's always the challenge. Does the support come off? And yes, the support came off, no problem. So the slicer did its job, the spacing was correct, and I don't have any problems there. That's usually my test. Like, yeah, it looks great, but can I get the support off? And if I can get these supports off without really struggling too badly, I think that that's a win. This one's coming off a little harder, but I think there's enough where if I grab it with a set of pliers, I should be able to get those off. But that's usually a telltale sign of proper spacing within the slicer. That could also be an adjustment I have to make, but again, quality-wise, it's right on par with anything else. This singular duck printed in 1 hour and 25 minutes, which is fast for TPU. That tells me now a full set of these will take roughly about 2 hours and 40 minutes. All right, so let's get into the material that I see the most amount of complaints on, which is PETG. So these are my bad idea mounts. This is basically a GoPro mount that goes on top of the DJI Avata. And essentially this singular unit right here printed in just about 1 hour flat. This is made out of PETG. I'm using an Overture PETG. It's a black PETG, nothing special. And honestly, it printed just fine. I think it printed just as good as my bamboo and probably just as good as my Prusa. I mean, the detail is really decent in this. And let's test the strength. That's usually a good sign of separation. Strength-wise, it's not cracking, which is good, which means it wasn't printed at too high of a temperature. It wasn't printed at too low of a temperature. I'm printing these right here at 240 degrees Celsius. 240 degrees Celsius with the Overture PETG. I found that if I go too high, I have problems and defects where the screws don't fit. And I found if I go too low, we have layer separation. So 240 seems to be the sweet spot, at least with this printer. And that temperature is always going to change depending on what printer you go with. But overall, I have to say everything I've printed thus far has printed out exceptionally well, and I haven't had really any problems with anything that's sitting on this table, except for this frog. This frog, garbage. All right, so what's my conclusion on the AnkerMake M5C? My conclusion is I think AnkerMake probably made their best printer second, because the M5 is just really big and it doesn't fit really anywhere easily. But with this, the M5C, it's smaller, it fits easily on a desktop, it's quiet. I can't stress that enough. It is really truly a quiet printer. It's simple to use. My daughter, you watching at home, could easily just download the application, set it up, bind it to your printer, and start printing same day without any knowledge. And I think that's the most interesting thing about this. For the first time ever, we're getting to where printers are becoming mainstream, where just anybody can do it. And I guess that scares a lot of people that have been in the 3D print world for a while, because it's losing its exclusivity. And when something loses its exclusivity, it becomes popular. And because it's becoming popular, I think that bothers some. But really, truly, this is an idiot's 3D printer. If you are somebody who wants to put minimal effort into learning something new, and you don't want to take the time to learn slicing, but you want to print cool stuff, and maybe you want to dabble with slicing things, the slicer is dead simple. You can just leave it on easy mode, pop something in there. It's going to recommend settings for you, and it'll even validate whether or not it will actually continue printing. And you can use your smartphone, which I think is pretty cool. So for me, the AnkerMake M5C is a no-brainer. $360 on sale right now. It's probably the best printer you can buy for the price. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of printers hitting the market right now. So I would probably also caution you to wait and see what else is coming to market from other competitors as well. But if you want something that could do TPU, PETG, or even higher materials, then yes, this is a viable option. Doesn't have a screen, you will need to use your phone. But beyond that, I'm really pretty happy with this. It's super small and it's been on this whole time and you probably can't even hear the fans. So I think that's pretty cool. But anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. If you wanna check this printer out for yourself, I'll leave links down below where you can check it out along with that $40 off coupon. I'll see you in the next video. As always, stay original.
They checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money to